The following podcast is offered freely through the Insight Meditation Community of Washington and by Jonathan Foust. To learn more or to make a donation to support this work, please go to www.jonathanfoust.com.
I grew up on a farm in Pennsylvania, and it was a gun culture, and I remember with all my little friends in school, we used to always make fun of the city hunters, who would come out. And there's one kind of classic story of these two hunters are out in the Pennsylvania woods, and they get lost. And they're trying to find their way out, and they get more and more and more lost. And one of them says, well, I think what we need to do now is we just shoot in the air 3 times, and then someone will come and find us. And so they do that, They shoot, and then they wait, and they shoot, and they wait. And finally, one of them says, okay, I'm really starting to panic. We are down to our last 3 arrows. I wanted to talk a little bit tonight around the opposite of getting lost, which is about creating and finding your direction, which is an important part of a mindfulness practice and kind of the practice of what's called skillful means, of skillful living. There's this amazing feedback loop provided by the universe that will let you know when you're out of balance. It's called pain and suffering. And we spend some time in this practice really looking at what is the role of suffering, and how can we learn from our suffering? How can we learn from our pain? How do we self-correct? So I'd like to touch on 4 things, if I can. One is a little bit about the Buddhist perspective on intention and purpose, or what's sometimes called right thought or right view. And talk a little bit about what happens when you can clarify what's most important. And then how do you support an intention when you put that in place? And how do you cooperate with reality while you're focusing on a particular intention or a particular aspiration that you have? Not that long ago, I was exploring with a woman who had been depressed for quite a while. And as we sort of honed in on really what wasn't working for her, and sort of her patterns of how her displeasure showed up, she was very aware of sort of a pattern of just sort of disengaging. She just felt like, I just can't engage into life. And there was one particular point that we kind of got to. She worked with a team of people, and she was really committed to being a harmonious member of the group. And an opportunity came up to bid for a position with more power and a lot more influence. And she didn't put her name in. She sort of passed up that opportunity. And so she had regrets about that. And as we talked about it, she realized that she really had 2 competing intentions. One intention was to be a harmonious, well-liked member of her team. And the other intention was to learn and grow and take on new responsibilities and develop herself as a person. And when she really saw this inner struggle, it really helped her to clarify what was more important and what was she willing to give up to really support what was most important to her. And she came to realize that while she valued harmony, she really valued learning and growing and developing herself. So she explored some strategies as to how she might do that. If you think about anything that you want that you don't have in your life, there's a chance that there's something inside you that wants it and something inside that isn't so sure. It's a fascinating place to explore. When we're not clear about intention, what we really, really want, it can lead to a lot of confusion, and it can lead to a lot of suffering. So Shunryo Suzuki, this great Zen master, he famously said, the most important thing is to know what the most important thing is. And by the way, when I wrote that, the word Suzuki with my spell check showed up as chunky. So from now on, he's going to be Chunky Suzuki in my mind. So this is the second element of the Eightfold Path in kind of classic Buddhist philosophy. Sankappa. It's thought of as kind of right thought, or like being aware of thought, but really it's more about right aspiration. What do you really, really want is the essence of that question. And it takes some time to recognize that. You really have to work at it. There's a classic story you may have heard about Warren Buffett. There was someone he was sort of mentoring who was working with him, and this guy's told the story a lot, but it's a really helpful one. And Warren said to him, write down the 25 things you really want to do in this year or the next year, or just in your life in general. So he kind of wrote down those 25 things. He said, okay, now circle the 5 most important things. So he kind of circled the 5 most important things. And then Warren Buffett said, okay, now you're just going to do those 5 things. And so I said, well, those are the really important things, but in my spare time, I really want to work on these other things too. And Warren Buffett said, no, you have it wrong. So those 5 things, those are the things you do. The other 21 things, the other 20 things, that is your do not touch list. Knowing what you want and giving yourself to it fully, there's a certain art there. There's this great story that I believe I've told before, but it was when I was practicing celibacy in the ashram, we used to tell this story a lot as a way to inspire each other. It's the story of Saint Tulsidas. And when Saint Tulsidas was a young man, he was madly in love with a girl from another village. And one night he couldn't stand not seeing her. He just couldn't take it. So he put on his best clothes and he made his way to her village. But to get there, he had to go through a woods, he had to swim across a river, and he had to go through this swamp. And so he did all of that, and he climbed a tree outside her bedroom, and he called out to her. And she came out to her balcony and saw this wild man, just all muddy and his hair all messed up, just looking at her, pretty intently. And she said, if you loved God as much as you love me, you'd be enlightened by now. And he went, you're right. And it changed the course of his life. There are lots of studies out now that are exploring the relationship between happiness and concentration. That we're happiness when we're engaged and moving towards something. A lot of the studies are shown, because there's a lot of studies now on the adolescent mind and mindfulness, that it's actually when kids are really focused, there's a real high brain coherence that happens. So getting clear on what you want will absolutely affect your happiness level. Then the question becomes, what do you want? I was with a good friend of mine, and I tend to be sort of an idea generating factory. And I was telling him about some of the projects that I might do in the future. And at some point he just got sick of it, rightly so. And he said, I think the real question is, what do you really want and what are you willing to give up to get it? That question really helped me focus down, because I realized that I could do anything, but I couldn't do everything. So there's a real aspect of getting real with what is it that you want and what you can actually do and what you're willing to let go of in order to make that happen. Here's an interesting reflection I'd like to run by you. If you like, you can close your eyes. This would just be like a little 3-minute inquiry. You might draw your attention back to your breath and take just a few long, slow, deep breaths. You might take a few moments just to reflect on what your primary projects are now, the most important relationships you're cultivating, your obligations, and your options. And I'll offer this inquiry, and then we'll take just a minute or two for you to kind of free associate. If you knew that whatever you chose to take on would be amazingly successful, what would you do? If you knew that whatever you chose to take on would be amazingly successful, what would you do? And you might explore, what would that feel like if you were to do one of these things? What would that feel like inside? And you can gently deepen your breath. And you can let your eyes open. I find that to be a helpful inquiry from time to time. Just sort of open up the frame a little bit. And for some people, when they reflect on that question, there's a sense of like, I would not be doing what I'm doing. For some people, it's, I would do exactly what I'm doing, but I would slow down a little bit more and savor it. And for others, it's just a blank. But it's a fascinating question, because the inquiry really comes down to, what do you really want? What's most important in your wild and precious life? And there's a concept I found really helpful. And that is simply recognizing your life as life energy units. Out of any given week, you have so many life energy units, so many like wakeful moments where you have the energy and the attention to apply towards something. Only so many hours. And the question becomes, where can you most effectively use them? How can you most effectively invest your life energy units? The more I pay attention to that, the more it's been quite helpful. This concept of life energy units came from a guy named Joe Dominguez, who wrote a book called Your Money or Your Life. And it's all about helping people to really clarify how they can live independently, financially independently. And he does this great exercise where you take your salary and then take the hours that you work, include the hours that you commute, include the cost of your wardrobe or your uniform, include the cost of commuting, include the sick days you have because of stress, and work out this whole formula as to how much an hour you're actually paid. It can be quite sobering when you realize, wow, 1 hour of my time equals X. I remember a good friend of mine went through that and suddenly was like, wow, do I really want to spend 5 life energy units taking my family out for dinner when we might use that time differently? I used to teach film criticism many, many, many years ago, and I loved it, and I loved film, and I would go to films, and I always loved plotting them out and getting the acts and the transitions and that sort of thing. And I'm kind of at a stage in my life where, where there's an opportunity to see a movie, I think, wow, do I really want to give away 90 minutes? It's an interesting thing to see how that's shifted in my life. But anything you choose to do, any activity you choose, is going to result in 3 different options. You're either going to get energy from it, it will be neutral, or it will deplete you on some level. Food is a really good example. Anything you eat, you can either get energy, it'll be neutral, or it's going to take some energy to digest that. And it's an interesting way to kind of tune in to the body every time you reflect on eating. But it's the same thing with your thoughts and with your speech and with your actions. That there's an end result of whatever you choose to do. So how do you choose to use your energy and use your awareness? As one of my teachers once said, consider the next thing you're about to say and ask yourself if it is an improvement on silence. Thank you for coming tonight. So taking time to get clear on what's most important is very helpful. It's tied into your happiness level. And then there's the whole process of what's called skillful means, which is how do you live your life in a way that you're moving toward what's most important? What do you need? What kind of support do you need to move in that direction? So I just went through a pretty rigorous audit of my life. There's a writer I really enjoy. His name is James Clear, and he talks about habits and creativity. And he's also a weightlifter and a photographer. He's a fascinating guy. But he did his end-of-year review, and I read it, and I got inspired, and I thought, you know what, I'm gonna take that on. So I'm actually gonna, because I so appreciated the transparency of his end-of-year review that I'm posting mine on my site. It's more than you'd ever want to read, but it's an interesting thing. And there are really 3 questions that you ask yourself as you reflect back over this last year. The first is, what worked? To really reflect on, like, what gave you energy? What moved you forward? What enhanced your life? The second question is, what didn't work? To kind of really honestly take a look at what depleted you or what was neutral. And the third question is, what direction are you going in? So given that, what course corrections do you have as you move forward? So just some of the headlines on my reflection, of what worked was I have a wonderful, harmonious home life. Very, very grateful for that. A big part of my life has been teaching and speaking and coming here. I really appreciated this opportunity to learn and grow, and it's been really great. Also, I'm really passionate about photography and video, so I've done a lot with that. I feel like I've gotten better at my editing and composition, and that's kind of thrilling. This year I revamped my website and kind of upgraded things to sort of force me to grow up a little bit. That was helpful. I came out with a new product, a nationally released product this year. And a big one was I really simplified. I went through all my systems and kind of broke them down as to how I could just be more efficient and automate more things. So I have a whole list of the software that I use and stuff like that if you're interested. There's a process, there's a little side note. There's a process I use called getting things done. You may have heard of David Allen about getting very clear about your projects and writing everything down so you don't have to hold it in your head. And it just reminded me, a good friend of mine and I were so into this years ago and always sharing notes. And one of the things that David Allen has you do is with filing systems, you put labels on everything so you know where it is. It's really, really clear. Everything goes somewhere. And this friend of mine told me that when he was divorcing his wife, he had an extra labeler, and he gave it to her. And he said, "I want to give you this. This really changed my life." And she looked at him like, "What kind of sick, twisted person are you?" But anyway, I talk about some of my systems. And savoring and celebrating my life. I just feel like there's been a lot of savoring and trying to do more acts of service. So that's been kind of cool. And then to really look at, well, what didn't work? And for me, this last year was supposed to be a sabbatical year, where I stepped back from leading the year of living mindfully, and Tara and I were going to do more kind of R&D stuff, and her life got busy, my life got busy, and that just didn't happen. It just turned out to be a very busy year. I realized that when it comes to product promotion and marketing, I really stink. I just never did any kind of mass marketing. I'm just too self-conscious for that. And I realized that my habits get a little bit out of whack because I have a really kind of an erratic schedule because I teach and travel so much. And there were certain things I wanted to do that I just didn't do because I didn't build in enough habits. So when I reflect on my direction, it really helped me to clarify that kind of transcended to anything I want to do. For me, it's about cultivating presence and compassion, of slowing down enough so that I can really savor and appreciate and really be awake to my life, not run by my commitments. There's something about continuing to streamline and simplify that's been really thrilling. One thing I did this last year is I gave away about 2/3 of my clothes. And the only clothes I wear are black, white, and gray. It's completely simplified my life. It's revolutionary, so. That was actually a really cool thing. I'm really dedicated to continue to improve as a teacher and speaker, and really open any feedback you have for me in that. And I've realized for myself that creativity really brings me alive, and I want to explore that more, and committing to publishing more of my photographs and doing more video and doing more writing and savoring more. So doing that inventory, and again, energy is either positive, neutral, or depleting. It can be very helpful. And I thought maybe we could do just a brief reflection, kind of take a time out for you to go through the files. So if you like, you could again close your eyes. And you might again reconnect with your breath. Just notice where you feel the breath the most predominant inside, and notice how that shifts your attention. As you reflect back over this last year, What worked? What are you proud of? What has given you energy? What are you most excited about? And as you reflect back over this last year, what didn't work? What leaves you feeling dissatisfied or depleted? What feels incomplete? What would you let go of if you could? And the third inquiry, what direction are you going in? What are you lit up about? And what enlivens you? What do you love? What gives you energy? And just in these last few moments, you might just sense if you were to do more of what you enjoyed, what lit you up, what you love, what would that feel like? What would that be like? And then when you're ready, you can deepen the breath and you can let your eyes open, or you can remain with them closed if you prefer. You know, it's funny as I listen to different teachers in mindfulness that oftentimes people will say, you know, it all comes down to two words, you know, let go. Or it all comes down to two words, keep going. And I can just as equally say right now, it all comes down to two words, pay attention. This practice has been described as intention and attention. Have an intention as to your direction, and then pay attention so that you can course correct. Continue to move and climb the mind toward that which you most want. So paying attention can be so helpful. Doing this inventory was helpful for me. And also helpful to look at, well, what doesn't work? You know, where do I leak energy? And for me, it's also asking, what do I need to support my intention? And this is where we come into skillful means, of really assessing, how do you dial in the most supportive environment you can that's going to move you toward what you most want? I realize for me that it's when I fall out of routines, my energy leaks really fast. If I don't get regular sleep, if I don't get regular exercise, it has a huge impact on my life. I've finally come to acknowledge out loud that my addiction to RSS feeds is not helping. It's just so easy to kind of get lost in news and new things and new little articles, and I can feel the endorphin rush pinging in my head, you know, when I can read a really well-written short article. Sometimes it's great and balancing. Sometimes I just do it to keep my mind busy. So what I need is regularity and really bringing attention to my habits. So one of the things I'm taking on this year, it's maybe a little bit OCD, but it's been helpful when I've done it in the past, which is to really track my activity. kind of track my behaviors. And I've done it in the past, I've gone way overboard. So I'm trying to dial it down a little bit. There's a saying that says you can manage what you can measure. It's one of the basic rules of business, you know. If you can measure it, you can manage it. It gives you some data to look at. So I'm kind of applying that to my life. So here's what I'm measuring. I'm actually tracking and measuring my sleep. And there's a very cool iPhone app. You just put it next to your pillow and it tracks how many times you turn over. And it's amazing. I've really learned a lot. I can really see the connection. If I don't work out, I'm not going to sleep as well. If I spend an hour on my iPad before I go to bed, I'm not going to sleep so well. When I drink coffee has an effect on how I sleep. And so I'm really beginning now, I've been doing it about a month, and I can see an absolute correlation to the wholesome habits and how they affect my sleep. It's been really kind of cool. I'm also into something that a writer by the name of Blake Ferris calls the minimum effective dose. Like, what's the smallest amount you can do to have the greatest effect? So I've too often fallen in the trap of setting really high goals and then falling short and just giving up. So the question is, what's the smallest goal I can set for myself that I can have a sense of accomplishment? So I've done a fair bit of writing in my life, and I've set the goal of 1,000 words a day or 500 words a day. And now it's just write something every day. Not an email, not a report, but something personal. And I have a great piece of software to recommend for you if you're interested for that. Daily meditation. It's important, and I'm pretty good at that. But again, to dial it in, because of course what happens is the days when when I don't meditate are actually the days when it's most important that I meditate. I do a daily check-in with my wife, which is important. Exercise, and I've sort of really refined that down to a minimum amount. But if I do that every day, I check it off and I can feel the benefit to that. And because creativity is important for me, I do some photography, some editing every day, no matter what. And I also put on there my doing dental care. That's my dental insurance. So what tracking does is it gives attention. It's a way of paying attention. And it also has a way of creating accountability, and it becomes a reflection. And so it's very easy for me to say one thing about what I'm doing, but when I look back at the data that I'm creating, there it is. So what does tracking data have to do with waking up? What I have really found is that it is a way, again, of forcing me to come back to the question of what is most important. Anytime we come back to that question, if I'm in a conflict or an argument with someone, if I can pause for a moment and ask myself, what's the most important thing here? It may not be about winning the argument. So here's what the Buddha said about practice and the path. He said, your work is to discover your work, and then with all your heart to give yourself to it. Another way of saying that is finding your dharma is your dharma. Finding your path is your path. And as you explore in your life every one of the commitments that you have, as you give yourself to it fully, it's important to evaluate, is what I'm doing in alignment with what I really, really want? And if it is, to give yourself to it fully. So the question becomes, what is most important in this life? From the Buddhist perspective, there's this great saying that says, to take human form is extraordinarily rare. To take human form and hear the dharma. And the dharma simply means the perennial truth. The truth that was true 5,000 years ago and will be true 5,000 years in the future. To hear that is extraordinary in the midst of this chaotic human adventure. To contemplate the Dharma is even rarer still. And to practice the Dharma is the most rare thing. Every tradition speaks of the importance of pausing. Because when you pause, new possibilities can arise. And the deep inquiry is, what do you want? What do you really, really want? So let's close with a short meditation. You might take a few moments to reflect on the different roles that you play in your life. It might be parent, it might be son or daughter, provider, student, spiritual practitioner, coach. Take a few moments to reflect on all the roles that you fulfill in this life. In the midst of all you do, what is most important? You can reflect on what's called the rocking chair test. When you are 102 years old, sitting on your rocker, looking back over this life, what was most important? And we'll close with this short poem. I would like to learn, or rather remember, how to live, to open to time and death painlessly, noticing everything, remembering nothing, choosing the given with fierce and pointed will, yielding at every moment to the perfect freedom of what is. And deepening the breath. And when you're ready, you can let your eyes open. Thank you for your kind attention and letting me rant a little bit about intention. May you and your intention have a great evening together. Thank you again, and I will see you in a couple weeks.